Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing really well and that your week has been great so far. My week is going really good and the weekend was rather very eventful. So we had a tech rehearsal sort of thing. So my studio has been a live venue for virtual events that's kind of happening. My band has been doing a bunch of gigs, and so there's another upcoming event that's a non-musical event, and for which we had to do a tech rehearsal of sorts. So that's kind of what happened on one of the days. And apart from that, we also got together with my engineer friend Anish, who is an incredible engineer and who makes us sound good every time we perform with my band. And he also runs a fabulous YouTube channel called Engineers Pick, where he handpicks musicians that he admires and he gets them to perform a song on his channel. So you should totally go and check it out. I'm sure you'll find something that you love on that channel. So check it out. Anyway, so him and I got together along with another friend of ours and we decided to measure my room. Now, when I say measure my room, I'm not talking about the dimensions of my room. Of course, I know the dimensions of my room, but I'm talking about the frequency response of my room. Meaning, every time I play my guitar here, or even when I make these videos and I'm talking to you, or I'm recording a band and they're performing in the tracking room, and I'm sitting here monitoring their performance, or I'm mixing their song after they're done tracking their stuff, whatever it is that I'm doing, if there is sound coming out from this room, the sound is actually bouncing off these walls and responding in a certain way, and it adds to what I'm actually hearing. So it's very crucial and important, I think, that for us to understand what is my room actually doing, what are the good things it's doing, what are the bad things it's doing, because understanding your room better will help you make better decisions, because you know how your room is kind of responding. I mean, if this is your workspace and if this is what you call, your den where you kind of sit and do all your work, then you rather get to know your room really intimately well, because it's, I think, your work just gets so much more fun when you know what you're doing, where you're doing. So I think that's kind of pretty much all the excitement stuff. And let's see where that goes. And it was, at least, if nothing, it was a very educating process for me. And I learned so much more about room measurements, and I learned so much more about room acoustics and all of that. And certainly, I know that it's going to improve my work in the studio as a musician, as a producer, an engineer, and all of that. So, diving into today's topic, that is home studio recording, and this is episode 2. In episode 1, we discussed the equipment that you require if you want to set up a recording studio in your bedroom. So we looked at all the things that you need to buy, or if you already have something, then how could you kind of put it to use? So you require a computer, either a laptop or a desktop or whatever kind of system that you would like to have, and an audio interface to be able to connect your instruments and microphones and record into the computer, and some kind of a headphones or speakers for you to listen and hear what's happening within the software, and also the software in itself, where you can actually sit and record all your music. And we also discussed microphones, mic stands, accessories, and a whole bunch of stuff. So assuming that you've kind of got all of these things together, in this episode, which is episode 2, we're going to talk about how do you set these things? What are you going to do once you have all these things in your hands? How do you connect all of these stuff, and how do you get things going and start making your first recording of sorts? So speaking of computers, I am using my 2012 MacBook Pro. It's an old machine, but it works like a charm. It's an incredible machine and I love it. This would be a good time if you want to ask, what kind of a computer am I supposed to get? What is the right machine for music production? Honestly speaking, if you look at the whole spectrum, there is the everyday average computer user who uses a computer to send emails, to browse, and to watch Netflix, YouTube, and maybe do college assignments or do corporate presentations or whatever it is. And that, for something like that, perhaps even a MacBook Air would perfectly suffice. It's light, it's easy to carry, and it's easy to work with for a daily use. And on the other end, there are professionals like maybe video film editors who edit 4K or higher than 4K footage, and they need a super spec machine, maybe something like a Mac Pro, which is a beast of a machine. And music production kind of happens to fall somewhere in between these two areas, meaning it's not as low intensive as the everyday machine. At the same time, it's not as high intensive as a 4K video editing machine. It kind of falls somewhere in between. But having said that, I have worked even on MacBook Airs, and I've run decently big enough sessions, and they have worked perfectly fine. It only starts coughing up when you load too many tracks, you start loading too many plugins and processing and editing and all of that. But for a beginner who's kind of getting started, you have absolutely nothing to worry if you have a MacBook Air. But if you're like me, that is, I never want to buy something that I would like to change maybe in the next couple of years, because I want to try and future proof myself for a while. I mean, I'm using a 2012 MacBook Pro here. That should speak quite a lot. I've been using it for 8 years now without changing this machine, and I'm still kind of like milking the cow, rather getting the value out of this machine. So I would like to try and buy something that's kind of like future proofs me. So if you're like me, then get yourself a MacBook Pro and spec it up a bit. It really helps a lot. I was using a Mac, an iMac, a 2011 machine as my main studio system for very, very long time, until around December last year, when I switched over to this Mac Mini here, which is a super spec'd up Mac Mini, and this is now handling all the work. In fact, my iMac still works fine. I've put it in the attic, except the display kind of stopped working and I couldn't get it fixed, so I had to buy an external display. And since I had an external display, I didn't want to go for another iMac. I decided to just get a Mac Mini and spec it up for the same price. So that's the whole deal with computers. And now the next thing that I would do once you kind of got a system for yourself would be to make sure that my computer detects the audio interface of my choice. Now in this case, as I said, it's a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. It's a brilliant interface. Typically, when you want to install or when you want to get your system to detect your audio interface, you need to install something called drivers. These are software that the company will give you. Possibly you can download it for free from their website, and you can install that on your computer. And then when you plug your interface using the default USB cable they provide with it, your computer reads the interface and assigns it automatically as its input and output device. And also along with that, the software allows you to control the very many little tiny features that interfaces like these can have, and it allows you to change and manipulate all those things. However, the 2i2 is a beautifully made class compliant device, and it does not require any drivers whatsoever if you want to use it with a Mac. If you're using it with a Windows machine, you still need to install drivers, but with a Mac, just plug it in and you're ready to go. So let's see, how do you set this thing up within your computer? So the first thing I would do, as soon as I connect my interface to the computer using the default USB cable, just take one end behind the interface and the other end into the USB port of your computer. You go to System Preferences and select Sound. And you want to make sure that the output and the input tab is selecting the Scarlett 2i2 USB, that you've selected this as your output and input. In my case, since I'm also recording my screen at the moment, I have to set my output as the Telestream audio capture just for the screen recording. But if I was not doing this, then I would have selected Scarlett 2i2 as my output as well. And additionally, if you want to change the sound effects, that's every time you click on something, you get these little pinging sound from your computer. You can select that to be Scarlett 2i2 as well if you want to. That's perfectly fine. Now, once you have done this, this ensures that your system is now detecting Focusrite as your default audio interface and not the little audio interface that comes within your laptop. Meaning, if you're going to connect your headphones straight into your laptop and play something from Apple Music, you're not going to hear anything because you need to now connect it to the Focusrite interface. And that's what we want to do. If you want to check it, you can also plug in your headphones to the interface and play back something from Apple Music and check it out and make sure that you're hearing audio. That ensures that your system is completely ready for you to start recording stuff. The next thing would be to download a recording software so that you can start recording music onto your laptop. Now, for this purpose, I personally recommend getting GarageBand. simply because GarageBand is a free software and it's available on your Mac App Store. And secondly, it's an incredible piece of software. It comes with a whole bunch of virtual instruments, sound libraries, samples, and all of that that lets you compose a song right out of the box without you requiring too many things. And also, once you start learning GarageBand really well and you're able to do some really nice recordings and work within that software, you can then upgrade to Logic Pro X, which is like a professional version of GarageBand by Apple again and works like a charm. And you can do a lot of work on that. You can pretty much produce your entire album, you can record, you can edit, you can mix and master everything within Logic. It's a fabulous piece of software. And the other advantage that I would also say is that Logic Pro X happens to be one of the more reasonably priced softwares for you to purchase later on as compared to a lot of the other companies like Ableton Live, Cubase, Pro Tools. All of these softwares are a lot more expensive compared to Logic Pro X. It's a one-time fee that you pay and you download it and you can install it up to 5 systems if I'm not wrong. So even if you've got multiple computers at home like me, you can have Logic purchased once and have it installed on your multiple systems without any issues whatsoever. So the next thing I would do is visit the App Store on your computer and search for GarageBand. And since I've already installed the software on my system, it's going to show me or give me an option to open the software directly. In case you had not installed the software, it's going to show as get, and you hit on get and then click install, and it'll pretty much run you through the whole installation process. Very self-explanatory, and once you do it, your GarageBand software is installed on your system. The next thing I would do is open the software. So when you open GarageBand, the first thing that you see is this little dialog window of sorts, which has a bunch of things for you to choose from. But before we get into that, the first thing is to make sure that we have downloaded the entire sound library that comes along with GarageBand. And for that, you would go to GarageBand, hit on Sound Library, download all available sounds. Now, since I've already done this, the option is kind of grayed out for me. But if you have not done this, then it'll show up and you have to click on it and make sure you download the entire sound library. So after you've done that, when you come back to this little screen here, you can either open a new project, which is what I personally recommend because you learn what kind of tracks to add into a project and how to set up a project and all of that. Or you can go to project templates and open something from here. I generally never recommend this because GarageBand or even Logic Pro for that matter decides to add certain kind of tracks preloaded with effects and plugins and stuff that you actually may not need. And also sometimes it ruins the sound of the instrument that you're kind of recording. I've seen this happen more so with guitars and vocals. Some really random effects kind of being added onto the track. So I never recommend that. I personally suggest open a new project, open an empty project. Additionally, you also have a cool feature called Learn to Play. You can learn to play guitar or you can learn to play the piano. And there are also artist lessons that you can purchase by visiting the lesson store below. And you can choose a guitar lesson, for example, and you can go for this, or you can go back to the lesson store and choose artist lessons, and you can pick up a song by your favorite band and you can learn how to play that song as well. So it's quite cool that they've kind of added all these features for you. But for now, let's hit new project, empty project. And there are this details icon here that you can click and it reveals additional details related to the empty project that you're opening. I suggest leaving everything as is and make sure that your input and output device is your audio interface of your choice. Okay, then click on choose and that will pretty much open up your first empty project on GarageBand. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to prompt you what type of a track you want to have. Now, GarageBand cannot be open without at least one empty audio track or one empty software track being added to the project. So you can't have a session open without any tracks, unlike the other softwares. So let's take a look at these quick 3 different types of tracks that GarageBand has provided. And mostly you'll end up using the audio track or the software instrument track to begin with. Audio track, as you can see here, as mentioned here, pretty much kind of displayed with a picture. If you're using a microphone either to record your own vocals or you want to mic an instrument or a guitar amp or an acoustic guitar, whatever it is that you want to mic, then you're going to be using an audio track. And similarly, if you want to use an electric guitar or a bass and you want to connect that straight into your audio interface and you want to use virtual amplifiers and pedal effects and all of that within GarageBand, then you're going to be using an audio track too. And if you wish to use a software instrument, now software instrument, the name itself suggests, meaning it's not a real instrument, but the instrument is being played within the software. Now, in a nutshell, how does software instrument actually work? So it's nothing but actual real instrument samples being recorded and captured and turned into a software of sorts, so that when you start hitting your QWERTY keys on your keyboard, or if you're using a MIDI keyboard like what I have here, the beautiful Native Instruments S61, you can get something a lot more simpler. If you're starting off, then something like this is what you'd be using to trigger different kinds of sounds within the software instrument track on your software. Okay, so let's try and open a basic audio track here. Click create. There you go. So the session pretty much opens up and you have a bunch of windows that kind of pops up into the screen as soon as you open a session. And the first thing that we want to look at is the library on the top left, or rather the left half of the screen. And library pertains things related to the track that you have selected. Now, for example, we have an audio track selected. So we have options such as voice, acoustic guitar, and electric guitar, and some legacy stuff that's basically stuff, external samples and all those things that kind of comes within GarageBand. So you can either select these. I would prefer leaving it empty. You can also close the library by hitting your Y shortcut, or you can hit the top left button here, which shows like a little folder, file folder thing. So you can hit on that icon and the library opens and closes. Next thing is this bottom half, which is a smart control tab or a smart mixer tab. So what this does is, based on the track that you have selected, it'll show you the settings available for the track, meaning your input settings. You can turn the monitoring on and off here. You can also have feedback protection. Don't use it as much, but you can also have plugins, meaning if you see that there's a compressor that's turned off, there's a channel EQ. And depending on what plugins are added here, you will see controls for those plugins in this little section right next to it. So because there's a compressor, you can see there's a compression amount, and because there's an EQ, you see certain knobs to assign your EQ. You can also set that by clicking this and adjusting here manually. And if you make changes here, it'll do the same thing. Okay, you can either control using the EQ here, or you can turn this off. And when you turn off that EQ, you see it toggles on the other side of the display as well. And you can do the same thing with your compression. If you turn it on, it toggles it on. If you turn it off, it toggles it off. So it's a pretty cool feature there. And also you can select the master, which means all the tracks together goes into the master track, and that's got some amount of processing there available for you as well. So that can be toggled by either using shortcut B, or you can again hit this little knob looking icon here on the left of your screen. So that opens it and closes it. So when you close all of these things, your session begins to look super clean. And this is what you call as the main window of GarageBand, meaning this is where you load up your tracks. You can load up a software instrument track. You can load up an additional, maybe let's say a guitar track. You can load up the very many different types of tracks, and all of them kind of stacks up here in this window. And when you start recording your stuff within this, you will see data being fed and those waveforms or MIDI regions showing up in this entire arrangement window. And also in this arrangement window, you can access the transport button, which has your play and which has your stop, which has your record button. It's got rewind and forward for you to move through the sections of your session. And also it's got a cycle button, meaning if you wish to loop something, you can hit that, and when it plays back, it's going to exactly loop that specific region. Like it's going to play for 2 bars and then loop back and go back to bar 1. That's kind of what happens. Okay. And you also have a little display window here, which has information related to the playhead. As the playhead, this white little line keeps moving across the session. It shows which bar you're on and which beat within that bar you're on. And also the tempo information of the project and the key in which your project is defaulted to. So when you drag a sample from this loop library on the top right, for example, you choose an acoustic guitar sample And even if this acoustic guitar is recorded in a different key, because the session is in C, it'll try to transpose that loop to the key of C major. That's what it's set for. So if you're writing a song in the key of D major, I suggest you go here and you change it to D major. And then when you drag the same loop into the session, it's going to now play in D major. That's the advantage of this. And then you have your time signature settings here. You can change this transport thing to display different settings. You can either have beats and project, you can have beats and time. That immediately changes and gives you a time code here. You can also just have beats, or you can have just the time. You can have either one of these. I prefer leaving it for beats and project. That's pretty much what I use most of the time. And then you have a little tuner here if you want to tune your guitar. And then you've got a little count in for your metronome and your metronome on and off. And that's the master volume slider. You can change it. You can reset it by hitting the option key and clicking on that. And there's a notepad, which is incredibly useful, because what the notepad does is allows you to leave notes. Suppose I'm recording something on this track and I want to share this file with you and I want to ask you to add your parts on it. I can leave notes here that you can go back and refer to and then add your parts accordingly. Suppose I say something like, I'd like the guitars to be double tracked. I'd like the electric guitar to play a plucking pattern. Something like that. You can just leave these notes, save the session, send it to your friend, and your friend can open and see what exactly you had in mind, and he or she can plan their parts accordingly. So it's a great feature to kind of leave everything within the session. You also have the loop library that you can access, and all the loops that GarageBand comes with will be available for you to access from here. You also have a media library here, which allows you to drag in external media into the project, such as an audio file, such as video files if you wish to add a video file. And you can check out your movie folder if you got something over there and you want to try and score a little music to a short video that you have. Then you can drag that video into your session and you can write some music or background score for that little piece of video. So it's a pretty cool feature that you can do with GarageBand. Quite a lot of things for a free software, trust me. So the other thing that I would like to talk about would be the drummer track. Now, I've spoken very extensively about the drummer track in some of my other videos. And if you want to check that out, do go and check out the video where I spoke about the best DAW, that is the digital audio workstation, meaning the software that you're using. That's called a digital audio workstation. I did a video on this and I spoke about the drummer track and its features in that. You can definitely go check that out. And you can either create a drummer track that automatically gives you a nice drum performance that you can change. You can modify using these little settings here, and you can change the type of drummer. You can do a whole bunch of things with this. It's pretty cool and quite an amazing feature. So trust me, check this out. So this is what GarageBand looks like, and you can now actually start recording your music within this piece of software. I would like to take a quick moment to talk about microphones and audio interfaces. Okay. So microphones and audio interfaces are a very big part of your recording process. So pretty much if you want to set up something, you are going to be spending a lot of money buying these two different products. So microphones, essentially, there are two main broad categories. And the first one happens to be a dynamic mic, such as the SM57 here. This is an incredible microphone and I love what this can do. I've used it to record vocals. I've used it to record loud percussion or drums. And you can also throw it in front of guitar amps really cranked up way too high. This can basically take a beating and be thrown in front of extremely loud sources, and this mic will perform perfectly fine. There's also the SM7B by Shure, which you would have seen me use in my videos in the past. And this is a wonderful broadcast mic, can again be used on vocals, one of the best vocal microphones that money can buy you. And you can use this also on drums. You can use this on guitar amps, bass amps. You can use it on a ton of different sources. And this mic, believe me or not, despite its price range, is being used on some of the most popular records that you get to hear today, and also some of the most popular records that have been made in the past, including I've been told that Michael Jackson used this mic for his vocals on quite a few records, and so did a lot of metal bands, and you can see them using in their documentaries and pictures and stuff. If you do some research, it's a wonderful microphone that money can buy you. I would totally go and buy the SM7B if I wanted to buy an award-winning classic vocal microphone. The other category of microphones would be the condenser microphones. Condenser microphones operate slightly different compared to the dynamic mics, and it requires additional power. So condenser microphones usually require something called as a phantom power, and this is a Focusrite Scarlett Studio microphone that comes bundled along with the Focusrite Scarlett Studio bundle. So that gives you the audio interface, a wonderful condenser microphone, a headphone, and a microphone cable along with it. I think it comes with a pop filter. I'm not really sure, but you'll have to check that out. So it's a wonderful bundle if you want to buy if you're getting started. However, here's a thing that I want you to know. Condenser microphones, unlike dynamic microphones, are very, very sensitive, meaning it's going to pick up a lot more information compared to your dynamic mics. So dynamic mics, for example, if you're using it on your vocals, then it's pretty much picking up the vocals that's right in front of the microphone. Whereas condenser microphones, while it's doing exactly so, it also tends to pick up everything that's happening around you. Suppose you're swallowing, it picks it up. And suppose you're recording your guitar and your guitar is kind of like, rubbing against your jeans, it's going to pick it up really well. It also picks up things that's slightly outside your room. Even if you're recording in your bedroom and you have your doors shut, depending on how thick your door is or whatever it is, most residential doors are not as thick as studio acoustic doors. So it's going to pick up conversations and all the noise that's kind of coming in from the outside. So I would never recommend a condenser mic if you're recording in an untreated space. Then I personally recommend that you get a dynamic microphone, because this will turn out to be a lot more versatile for all your needs and you'll be more than happy. However, condenser microphone has its own uses too. It's incredibly detailed, meaning when you're recording stuff like an acoustic guitar or maybe a violin or something really sensitive, a soft instrument, then you can get some incredible detail going on with condenser microphones. So I would personally, if I'm starting off, recommend something like the SM57, because this is not a very expensive microphone. It's super value for money, and you're going to be using this even when you become a super high class producer. This is going to be one of the first microphones that you'll stock up in your locker, and you'll never stop using that microphone. So that's never going to go for a waste. And then as you get better and you start learning production and stuff a lot more, I would then recommend maybe you can invest in a good condenser microphone, or you can buy a bundle like these which comes with it and you can use it only when required, and buy a 57 or so additionally along with the bundle. That would work as well. So that's about microphones. Now, with regards to audio interface, I spoke about, like I said, this is an incredible audio interface that money can buy. Again, it's a beautiful interface. However, let me tell you something. Now, when it comes to buying an audio interface or microphones, this is where you can get totally lost, because there are thousands and thousands of audio companies out there who all make really good sounding products, and they are going to sell you by putting all kinds of features and offers and all sorts of stuff on your face, and you're going to be confused, wondering which one should I buy. Honestly speaking, like I said, focus on what you need. If you're starting off, then your requirement is possibly to record one channel. Maybe you just want to record your vocals, and maybe you want to do podcasts like these, or you want to be able to record your guitar and your vocal. So you want to use two different microphones simultaneously. Then something such as a 2i2, which has two inputs, will suffice more than enough. And if you want to get something that has more channels in it, meaning you're somebody like me and you wish to record drums, you wish to record probably an entire band at the same time, then you'll require a bigger interface with more inputs, such as the Universal Audio Apollos that I have here. Focusrites also do make bigger interfaces. Pretty much all the brands do. So do check it out. The prices differ a lot. And predominantly, the most important thing to remember is this: your audio interface has a role to play. So when you're sending signals, either your vocal signals going through a microphone or your guitar signals going through an instrument cable, these signals are usually really feeble and tiny and weak. So it's kind of like, imagine Captain America before he became Cap. You know how lean and weak he was? So that's what the signals are like. But then you juice it up like what they did with Cap. And then he becomes this really strong guy. So that's kind of what you do with your audio interface. You juice up your signals by putting it into these preamps and using the gain knob and making your signals a lot more stronger and healthier so that you get enough juice out of it for you to be able to process and work on those signals within the software that you're using. So that's kind of what a gain knob does. So your audio interface, number one, is providing you preamps to juice up your gain and help you record your signals at a healthy level. The second thing that it's doing is these analog signals, meaning the vocals and instrument that you play in the real world, all of these have to go into these interface and then be fed into a computer. Now your computer cannot understand the language that you and I understand because computers are not built to understand the language. It needs a digital language for these softwares to understand what's happening in that world. So audio interfaces provide what is called as an analog to a digital conversion. So it internally takes the signal, converts it into digital, sends it out through these inbuilt USB cables, which feeds into the computer. And then when it's done doing the work that it's doing, you also need to hear it back, which is then going to convert the digital signal back to analog and feed it to us either through the outputs here, which is connected to your monitors, or your headphone jack in the front. That's predominantly what your audio interface is doing. It's providing you a preamp, and then it's providing you what is called as a DAC, digital to analog conversion, or D to A or A to D conversion. That's kind of what it's doing. So technically speaking, all interfaces can do this, and these are built exactly to do these two roles specifically. However, along with these two functions, interfaces tend to do a lot more stuff as well, such as the universal audio interfaces that I use. Now they have what we call as a Unison technology preamp, meaning if I want to record through an actual analog old console, just like I said, when you take something and put it through these analog stuff, I was talking about this in another video. I think I titled the video called The Analog Color. You should probably check it out. So analog units, the preamps, had a certain color or a character to itself that it would add to your sound. It's like how I was explaining in the beginning of the video that if I'm speaking in my room, my vocal is bouncing off these walls, and there is a certain amount of reverberation that this room kind of adds to my vocal. So that's what I'm talking about when I say it's adding something. Similarly, when you pass your signal through these analog units, the components that is used in the analog units added its own footprint onto the signal, which then colored the signal. Now, some people like that color because they feel it's incredible. Some people don't want it. They want a super clean, pristine signal. So which means digital is the way to go. Now, analog equipment can be very expensive. Units such as UA allows you to model those analog sounds right when you're recording. So those are kind of additional features that some of these brands will offer when you're buying their audio interfaces. Do you need it? You don't. Do you want it? Does it sound cool? Yeah, it does sound cool, and you may want it. But you can make that decision at a much later period of time, and you don't need it when you're starting off with your recording setup. So I strongly recommend get what you need and not what you want when you're starting off. Also, in my opinion, that whichever audio interface that you buy around a certain budget, all of them are going to have super clean sounding preamps. So you're not really going to have much issues with the recording quality. They all are going to offer a very similar quality across the price range. So there are many audio companies that are going to try and sell you their product by telling you that their company is superior. But the fact is, I really can't say if they're superior or not. But all I can say is quality-wise, they're going to be very similar, but maybe build quality-wise, the after-sales service, and those are some of the things that you may want to consider if you're choosing one particular company's product over the other. Definitely, the after-sales service matters a lot. Traditionally, audio interfaces never fail. I've never had audio interfaces failing on me. They work like a tank, and they have another interface called Motu that I use when I go traveling with my band, and that interface has taken a ton of beating. In fact, all the printing stuff, the branded stuff that was on top of the interface is completely erased because it's kept under the sun, and man, that interface looks like a piece of crap and it works perfectly fine. So interfaces can take a lot of abuse too, and generally they don't give up. But however, like I said, after sales service is something that really matters a lot. If you're at a certain gig or you're trying to do a recording and something kind of fails, you want to be able to reach out to the service center, maybe at least get a spare till they try and fix your unit or whatever it is. So that is, if that's a point that you kind of consider a lot when you're making purchase, then yeah, do check out brands such as Focusrite, which are very popular, at least in the Indian market where I am. Focusrite is hugely and widely sold, beautiful products. Some of the other stuff that I can personally recommend would be the Audient interfaces. The Audient ones also have this Evo line, and the Evo interfaces are fabulous interfaces. I got two interfaces for a couple of my friends, and man, they work like a charm. They're so well built and they look so cool. They have their own kind of look going, and it's pretty nice and cool again. So check out these brands, and again, you're not going to go wrong with pretty much either of these stuff, honestly. So buy whatever works within your budget. Keep in mind, buy what you need and not what you want, and don't really get lost in this whole cycle of marketing that gets thrown at you. There's always time for that when you learn things, and then you'll be able to make better choices based on what you actually require, based on your needs and what you want to do. And then you're going to be using your money wisely, you're going to be investing wisely, and that, trust me, is a huge life-saving factor in your music production journey. So anyway, I hope this episode was good enough and sort of helped you understand how do you set up all of these things, hook it up, and get something started. In the next episode, I want to actually record a piece of music using these little equipment that I have around me and show you how it's done. So stay tuned for the next episode, and until then, do not forget to create, play, and record. I'll see you soon. Bye.